you want to go down the line and just answer them one at a time? Or do you want to just pick specific ones out?
Sure. Yeah, whatever you guys want.
Yeah, some are named like specifically.
Yeah.
So
like I was thinking, like I can just start. I can like read out the first one, and Randy can start talking about it. And we can like work through it. Like if anything needs to get added on top of it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I'm good with it being like a collective for sure. Yeah. Either way. Yeah.
All right. So, Randy, you're aggressive and fearless, yet exceptionally disciplined. Exceptionally disciplined. Has lack of discipline ever failed you in any way?
I would say the first part of that question is I am not fearless. Like everybody, I do have fears. And I'll share a quick story about fears and what happens physiologically when there's a psychological stimulus. So, I did, through the course of my career, did almost 70 DAs. So a direct action mission is a set point that needs to be addressed, and you'd have a fighting force that would, take the heat to the bad guys. And within those 70 operations, there was different forms of method to infill. So sometimes it was by helicopter, sometimes it was by vehicle, sometimes it was a combination of a few things. But the reality is, every time we mounted up to do a job, I would pee a little bit. And I would feel, I wouldn't wet myself completely, but I would pee a little bit in my pants, and it would get my attention. And I remember kind of looking down like, what the fuck, man? This is like the 50th time I've gone through this. And like, why the fuck is this always happening? And what I found funny is when I was fighting as well, so almost, or not almost, I had 15 professional fights every time. So my name would get called. And for those of the viewers that are not aware, what would happen is you'd be in the dressing room or change room, then they would call your name. Once your name goes forward, you go to the pit, and the pit is kind of like the point of last return, or point of no return. So you go to the pit, the commission would sign your gloves, they give you one last checkout, and then you would hang out there until the fight that was ongoing would finish. And again, every time I was in the pit, I would pee a little bit. And I'm like, what is happening? And I pissed a little bit in my cup, not like wetting myself, but enough to get my attention. And I realized, okay, this is my body saying, hey, you don't need this little bit of piss, so it's going to get rid of it. And that was my physiological response to the fact that I was afraid. I was afraid of getting knocked out. I was afraid of getting I was afraid of letting my buddies down. I was afraid of a whole bunch of shit. So for the question to come in, and I may appear like I'm fearless, it is not accurate. I have fears just like everybody else. I think the difference is I'm also very courageous, and I will face fears with conviction and push through it, even if that means I fill my cup with a little bit of piss. And so that's just the way that I dealt with it. Discipline for me personally, I would say a lack of discipline hasn't really ever bit me in the ass, but being too hard on myself or maybe losing patience because I'm trying to make something happen has bit me in the ass. So I wouldn't necessarily say discipline has let me down, but I would say maybe trying to instill too much rigidity did bite me in the ass in the past. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but
I think it does.
Yeah.
I think also, like, it's important for people to understand when people come across fearless, what that means, in actuality. Like, I don't think there's any, as far as I know, and my personal experience, I don't think there's any situation where there's no fear existing. Like, your fear is there for a reason. Like, it's a warning signal. It's telling yourself something. It's giving you the idea, like, you need to be careful about something. And so it serves as a tool. If you don't have that fear, like, you're missing a piece of that tool. So it doesn't put you on edge the same way. It doesn't keep you as sharp the same way. And so having that fear is important. What you do with that fear, like you said, like how you change that fear into something that's productive, and you can use it as a tool in that way, is something that is a skill that's built over time. Some people can do it easier than others. I think, as far as I've seen, some people can't do it at all. Some people fold in half all the time as soon as they feel fear. that I personally feel they just don't have the tools yet. Like they haven't been put in the situation enough to understand like they need to build tools and they need to start addressing things so that they don't feel that same type of fear in the same way.
Yeah.
Like it's still there, but you use it in a different way. As far as I know.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, I kind of echo Brian's as well. Like, I mean, every time we go to do like a tactical operation, like I'm nervous. Even if I've done that same one, wouldn't even say nervous, but like there's a point in me that I'm just like, like I'm weighing out all the consequences in this. I'm never like, oh, I've done this 1,000 times, like it's fine. Because nothing is always the same. There's always something that changes, right? So I think just like you actually quoted it one time, Randy, and I really liked it when you said that a little bit of paranoia will keep you sharp, but too much paranoia is going to debilitate you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I've really taken that to heart too, because that's what it is just that little bit of fear or that little bit of paranoia that's kind of keeping you sharp, keeping your senses alive, and then I find you're more honed in and ready. But you're right, it can collapse you if you don't have the tools, like Brian said, to kind of keep you on that path, right? So there's a training element to it, putting you in uncompromised positions to, you know, maybe even have a bit of a failure to learn that lesson and then go back and then learn from it, right? Like,
Do you
yeah,
guys think that fear is it's something that's always there that maybe we turn it into another type of feeling? Like when you say you feel excited, like you're turning that fear into excitement.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. There's times where I'll try to avoid a situation. I'll try to avoid it because I'm not comfortable with it, but not very often. Normally, if I'm getting nervous about something, I tend to dig in. I'm like, okay, all right, I want to be here. I'm feeling this for a reason. So what is it? And I'll try to get to the bottom of it. Not very often will I shy away from confrontation. Not very often will I shy away from anything that's going to cause some friction.
I agree. Like I personally might have a bit too much of it. Like I look for confrontation. I think a little too much, and I dive into it a little too much, and it brings itself to circumstances at times you don't need to be that confrontational, but because of a certain attitude, a certain way you dealt with processes and problems, especially within our industry, if you're actually operational in any way, like the way you attack problems is very different than maybe the normal person does. So you look to be a little more aggressive than the normal person when you attack problems. And I think that comes off very differently to other people who don't have that same mentality in any way.
and I think you both can speak to it too on that, where you just said, right, and I got me as well, is that you know, the general public tend to shy away from those things, right? This day and age, right? They're kind of like, I don't want that noise. I don't need to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that's just because it's the easy way of dealing with things, right? It's like, I'll put that off. But then what happens when you put things off, right?
Yeah, of course.
And it builds and it builds and it builds,
Man,
right? Or you'll never
I think that's a great point, and this is probably a great time to talk about it because I would really like to hear both of your guys' perspective. And not to put you on the spot, but our country is fucked up right now, 100%. And I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it. The reality is, in my opinion, is people are choosing to bury their head in the sand and pretend like shit is not happening because they're afraid of the realism that is associated with how messed up things are right now. So rather than saying, you know what, let's do something about it, people are like, oh, I didn't see that. Or even worse, is like, oh, it doesn't affect me. So until it affects me, I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And then I get fired up because there is a problem societal into this country. And I truly believe to the core of my being, a lot of it has to do with fear and weakness. And, just to back it up a little bit before I open up the floor to you two, but, there's a lot of older people older than us. And when they speak, sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but when they speak, I dig in, man. And I'm like, well, this dude, you can tell he's lived through some shit. And this guy has got some great advice to pass on, right? Because they're older, and the reality is they've seen more, they've done more. So I try to listen a little bit more. But man, it's tough to get experiences until you've actually gone through an experience. But that being said, man, it's a perpetual problem that I think so many Canadians are just like, ooh, if it doesn't affect me, then I pretend like it's not there, you know, and that is fear driven, in my opinion.
I mean, you can speak to it, Ryan, for there. I can speak for it here in the States,
Yeah,
for sure.
I I agree with you, Randy. And I think it is basically driven on the fact of fear. I mean, you can put weakness in there too, like mental toughness for sure. And I would agree with you from the job that I do on every day. The general rule of thumb for most people is just like, well, if it doesn't affect me, then I don't want to get involved, right? It's just like, like you see something happen on the side of the road and you know that's not right. There's a very, very select few people that would step in and be like, hey, what are you doing? Or, hey, do you need help? Right. And I would even put a percentage on that of like 5%, 10%. Maybe I'm even being generous with that.
Yeah.
Right. And that most are just like, oh, well, that's not happening to me. So whatever. Like,
Yeah, man.
maybe I'll take my phone out and I'll videotape it from a distance, or I'll call 911, which is great, and be like, yes, something's happening over there. Okay, well, you can see, I don't know, I left. I'm a block away now. Like I last saw it there, right?
Yeah.
I'm putting a
No.
professional piece on it, but that and it is. I think I hear people like, well, I don't want to get sued. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get this. And I mean, I'm using an incident as an example, but that is how people get involved. They're like, oh, it's none of my business and this, and I'm like, well, certain things are not your business, and other things are. I think you kind of have a duty to step up, but it's I think that we've had people come in that are of that mindset. I use
Yeah.
the gym as an example, right? And then when we talk and we do scenario based training or we do things like that, I watch their attitudes change, and they're like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Well, but just going back to Brian's point, and they now have the tools that they feel more confident to be the one to speak up, to be the one to do that. And
Yeah.
we're in this industry and we joke, right? We're like, it's a hard industry to get people into, but we see such a big change in creating community leaders through this type of training.
Yeah. Yeah, this type of training definitely builds people's confidence, and you're right. It gives them the tools to navigate through a series of chaotic situations that maybe they didn't have before they started the training. So, yeah, I agree.
I think, guys, like we're trying to build communities, correct? Like we're trying to build strong communities. Those communities are made up of individuals. Those individuals have to fit a certain profile to help that community. I think in today's society, across the board, I don't know if it's country based as much. It could be in certain areas that have harder people in harder countries, but where things are done for us and we don't have to actuate the emotions, like we don't have to get involved to help ourselves as much, like we don't have to do as much to actually solve the problems ourselves. People get very lazy. The norm is to find somebody else to solve the problem versus solve the problem yourself. And that lends itself to everything. I think our goal and our job we're trying to create a person that can be relied on. That's an asset in every aspect, not just one aspect. Self-defense and self-preservation is one aspect. Like we're trying to create a complete person that can be relied on in many different aspects. So like, just like we talked about, like the casualty care, like understanding how to do that type of work, shooting, understanding how to that type of work, how to do survival out in the woods or in urban environments, like how to truly, if you can't do it on your own, if you can't look at yourself and be your own first responder, like how are you going to help somebody else? So I think as far as I'm concerned, we're trying to build that type of person. And it starts with them conquering fears all the time because everybody's afraid, everybody's nervous. Even walking into the gym, just say training by itself without having all these other things attached to it. People are very nervous and very afraid, no matter who they are, that they don't want to feel silly. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to not have the answer. They don't want to look like they don't know versus being a student all the time and having, no ego when it comes to those things. And I think that's partly difficult for people. I think the more we progress together, as a community, as a group, like the better we become as building those types of people, because we fill in all these areas that I might be weak in and somebody else is strong in. And so the larger the community, the larger that group of people becomes with information, and the stronger they become with that information. And I think we live in a society now that people live on their phones. They live in a different world. They don't live in reality. They live outside of reality where they can focus on something else versus dealing with like what's happening in their own lives today physically. Like where are they today? How are they going to make themselves better today in all these different ways?
Yeah.
Like are they doing all the things that they can possibly do to make themselves stronger, better, faster? You know, that should be their goal. It doesn't mean that it is. The question is how do we push people into that without pushing them away, without making them feel worse for it, making them feel stronger instead of weaker that they're not doing those things yet. And if we can do that, we'll create stronger, as far as I'm concerned anyway, we'll create stronger communities. But I do think you're right. It comes from a place of weakness, and it comes from a place of fear. The question is like we know the only way to solve that problem is to face your fear, to face your weakness, and dive into it so it doesn't become a weakness. It becomes a strength, or it becomes something that at least is not a weakness.
And I think there's a lot to be said about it's okay to make mistakes. Like some people, they fall victim to their fears because they don't want to embarrass themselves, they don't want to look foolish or whatever. But if people would accept the fact that it's okay, if you're trying something and you fumble, you slip, you fall, you make a mistake, that's okay. You're going to learn from that. So what I would encourage people to help overcome their fear is, man, accept the fact that you're probably not going to get it right the first time, and that's okay. You're going to learn a lot from it, you know?
I agree with you. Like I tell people, you need to not get it right so you can fix it. You're going to learn 10 times more from your mistakes than you will from that success. It feels better to be successful, but you're going to learn 10 times more from fixing all those mistakes. And so that means you have to do things wrong to do them right. And if people would be comfortable, like you say, with that and be okay with it, I think, they'd be more inclined to jump into things. Yeah.
And I also think too, like if you had a good point there. Push people into it, but without pushing them away. If we could help show people what I'm trying to do, and I know you guys are as well. What I'm trying to do is show people what they're fully, really capable of, and let them tap into what their full potential is. And here's the reason why: because it's not about necessarily them. It's the individual. It's about the bigger picture. So being an asset to society rather than a liability, what that means is you have the ability to help somebody when they need help. So it's not about you, it's about the bigger picture. And that's what I try to share with people. And I know some people are accepting to it and some people are very resistant to it because
Really?
what's funny is I did a public speaking course a few years ago when I was still at my unit, and the guest speaker that came in, she was a gem, and she used this analogy, and it was called people are tuning into their own radio station, she said, and it's called WIIFM, and this radio station is nonstop, like you talked about the phone, right? And I said, we all kind of did. Everyone's in the class like WIIFM radio station. What are you talking about? And she said a lot of people will filter through life, and it's all about what's in it for them, what's in it for me, right? So I'm gonna do something, but what's in it for me? Or I'll help you, but what's in it for me, right? And I said, man, that will stick with me forever. That is a brilliant acronym. And I love the way she delivered it, and she was a great guest speaker. And now, as a principal in life, like, what can I do for my buddy, or what can I do for my neighbor, or what can I do for somebody who I don't know? Because it's the right fucking thing to do, not because I'm looking for a pat on the back.
100%. Like it's crazy. It's like we start every test in the school the same way. I mean, as simply as saying like, you're here for the person next to you. Focus on making them successful, and somebody else will do the same for you. Like, and take that out into the world, and everything would get better.
Yeah.
It's just that simple. Like, it's that easy.
Yeah.
But obviously not. It's not that simple and not that easy for people to do. But in theory, it is.
Yeah. So, something that is simple doesn't always mean easy to apply,
For
right?
sure.
And actually, Ryan, let me ask you this question. As an active police officer, I mean, I admire and I have a ton of respect for all law enforcement professionals. The shit that law enforcement professionals deal with day in and day out is the scum for the most part. You know, some people just make bad decisions and they deserve, you know, a little bit of a nudge or some mentorship. But let's be honest, the majority of the people that you're dealing with are the shitty part of our society. So, Ryan, as an active police officer who's dealing with the shitty parts of our society, is there ever a breakthrough moment where you can tell that somebody's just made a bad decision or at the wrong place at the wrong time, and then they have said or done something that makes you kind of, you know, proud or happy that there are good components of our society come to the surface?
Yeah, I mean, I take every situation on face value. Like, I mean, you have your general people, like you said, like you use the word to describe them. Like, and some people you come on, you're like, oh, it's that guy again, or it's that girl again. Like, yeah, they're never gonna learn. But you know, for the most part, you still evaluate it. Like, even I've gone into situations where there's been really bad people involved, and I know that going in, but I always tend to kind of walk into the situation with an open mind, anyways, even though I know what they're doing, and uh, and I build rapport. Like the number one skill I find that I have is how I talk to people and my communication skills, because that at the end of the day, that's the first line of defense, anyways. They
Yeah.
know I'm confident how I talk to them, but I don't treat them like this.
Yep.
But I don't pump their tires either. We're on the same level, right? But that gift of the gab, as they say, and but yeah, like you know, sometimes they'll surprise you, or they'll be like, you know what, man, I know this was wrong, but this is why I did it, or this is what I felt, or blah blah blah. And I mean, even as a an officer, you don't want to get lost in that um, profiling. And I know that we joke about it all the time because, and people are like, "Oh, I don't profile." Me. Yeah, you do. We all,
Yes. Fucking
hey,
bullshit.
we do. Of course, we do. I
Yeah.
do it. I do it all the time. I'm guilty of it.
Yes,
But
yes, we do.
yeah, of course. But what I do with that is that I'm like, well, yeah, like fair enough. I'm gonna look at this on face value. I'm still gonna take it for what it is. But you gotta have some empathy. You gotta understand suffering yourself, right? Like I'm just like, I can see why you did this, and I get it. You know, does it fall into the realms of the law that I can maybe use some discretion here? And I have, and it's paid off for me down the road, right? Because then I meet that person again, and then I'm like, hey, you remember that time? Remember that time that I came here and we talked about this?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, man, yeah, yeah. And I got to be honest, most people that I arrest that are, you know, bad people, if you want to use that word, you can use other words too, is that every time I do it and I tell them why I'm doing it, and if I say it in a way that's like firm and fair, let's say, if I'm going to use that term, every single one of them always say to me, they're like, yeah, man, it's your job. I get it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your job. Yeah, fair enough. Okay, let's go, or whatever, right? And it's the ones that haven't experienced it that like lose their marbles,
Yeah.
or they're just real high and out of control. then I'm not going to be able to talk to them at all. But yeah, those are surprising ones. I've even had ones that like were like career criminal people that I've dealt with and had some pretty like intense moments with, that I've seen, like you don't hear about them for a little while and then they resurface and they're like working. Now that doesn't happen all the time, but there's the odd one that they come
Sure.
out. And I had one guy actually, he was a real bad dude for quite a long time. And I knew his family from outside policing, and they were good people, hardworking, had hit rough times, but they still worked and they tried to do the best they could, right? This kid just, he was a nightmare. But he ended up, I saw him probably, I don't know, it was about a year ago, and he's like, hey man, he's like, do you remember me? And I'm like, yeah, I know who you are. And he's like, I'm working now, man. I've got 2 kids that I got to provide for. And he's like, you know what? We can speak for there. He's like, every time you kicked my ass or you did this and that with me and this and that, he goes, I remember that. And he's like, and I thank you for that every time you did that, because it's finally got me straight and I'm doing this and I'm clean and I'm this and that. And I'm just like, oh. I'm like, that's
That's
awesome.
awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
And
How's that make you feel?
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, I mean, You know, and you brought up policing and you know, like the burnout right now, I know it in the States as well, like guys, and I got asked this, I got interviewed by a girl from, oh God, what was that company? The one that Jared and those guys do, the Tricom, but it's the fitness one, like train as a SEAL or something like that.
Yeah.
It was like fit to fight stuff. Anyways, she's like, what do you tell police officers that want to quit? Because that's all I hear is that cops want to quit. They hate their job, blah, 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 this and that. I'm like, go back and remember, go back to the time when you wanted to be one and why you became one, and never lose that in your head.
Yeah.
Because the reason why you got into this, hopefully for the right reasons, was to help people to not tolerate violence and try to make a difference, right? I know that sounds like corny, like I'm reading out of a book, but that's why I did it. I hate
I
bullying,
mean,
you know?
does
Like,
it go to, every morning when you wake up, no matter what job you have, are you asking the question like why? Like, are you answering the whys of what you're doing?
yeah, absolutely. And every job has hard days, like just like everything. You take the good with the bad, but and then you look to the person to the right and you look to the person to the left and you're like, okay, am I here for these people and are they here for me? And most of the time they are,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it brings us to the next one of the questions anyway. When it comes to taking ownership, address the difference between reason and excuse.
Mhm.
It's a good question.
Yeah. Like people use reasons and they use
Reason.
excuses all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost find they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
agree with
mean?
that.
Like, because I can make an excuse, that's fine, but I can justify the reason for the excuse if I want to use it,
Yeah.
right? Like the one Brian had stuck with me. You said it one time. You know, people come in and they're like, "I got a really bad knee, so I can't train," or "My shoulder's all jacked up and I can't train," and this and that. And I've heard people come in all the time like, "I'd love to do what you do, but like I have a bad knee," and I'm like, "Okay, that's great." I go, "Well, you're going to need to learn how to fight or defend yourself with that bad knee because I can tell you right now, a bad person or somebody that's going to attack you, they're going to see you limping around. They're going to be like, that guy,
Yeah.
or that girl, or this.
Yeah.
Like I can tell these weekends right there because that's the side I'm going to go to. So
Yep.
like, to be honest, like your excuse is kind of like it's going to be even worse for you. Like I would be even more wanting to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. And then I would pile on to that and say, well, like prioritize, what's important. So if there is something that is more important right now, be where your feet are, take care of that,
Yeah.
and then filter through the importance as you kind of check them off. Like if people want to accomplish a certain thing, very easy to put obstacles in front of themselves. Very, very easy to say, well, I'll just wait until next month when it's a better time, or I'll wait until next year, or I'll wait until the new year. So, well, you're making excuses and putting obstacles in front of yourself. So prioritize what it is that you want to achieve right now. Like if tomorrow will not come, if tomorrow is, this is it. What would you want to do right now? And then live that day like it's potentially your last day. Um, I don't mind sharing it. Like for guys that know me well, I'm busy, man. I'm people say they're busy, and sometimes you're like, okay, maybe you're busy. So I started to stop using the word busy, and I say I'm active. I'm active because I choose to be. And for those who know me, there are very few hours or even parts of the hour in a day that I'm not doing something. And the reason that I attack the day like that is because the reality is, and I think maybe it's part and parcel to some experiences that I lived through, but the reality is I'm very aware that tomorrow might not be here. So I'm doing as much as I possibly can today. So no excuses, just action.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a built-in discipline, maybe that's a lived discipline. How do I share that? How do I help other people with that? Is the moment that I hear people murmur an excuse, I'll squash it. I'll squash it, man, but in a nice way, right? I'm not trying to crush their souls, but I'll squash it. Like, really? Are you sure? Like you're unable? Here, I'll give you an example. Actually, I'm working with this young lady, man. She is an inspiration. She lives almost an hour away from the gym. She has a little girl, so she's a single mom. The only time in her schedule she can train is 5:30 in the morning before her work. And, you know, because of finances and time and et cetera, she can only train once a week, which is amazing. So once a week, I meet up with her at the gym, 5:30 in the morning. That means she gets up at 4 a.m. She commutes
Awesome.
the hour, trains with me for an hour, and then she goes to work. Like,
Awesome.
she is an inspiration, and I'm going to share her story one of these days because I think she would help a lot of people when people are trying to get out of their own way and they're making excuses or obstacles to why they're not achieving a thing. Here, this young lady, man, she's like, you know what? She told me straight up. She's like, I put on some weight. I'm not happy with it. I've traveled the world. I've seen different things. She's like, I want to take control now while I can. And she's only 35 years old, right? Getting
Awesome.
after it. Yeah, man,
Awesome.
it's awesome. So like no excuses, right? She just figured
Yep.
out a way to overcome and prioritize what's important for her.
Yeah. I think a lot of times people come to me and they start giving excuses. And what I tell them is, listen, like, you're giving me a lot of excuses to fail. Give me the reason that you're going to succeed. Like, show me the reason. Tell me the reason. Like, stop making excuses about failing and create reasons that you're going to succeed. Like, you can have all the reasons in the world to do whatever you want to do. It's either you're going to make it happen or you're not. You can use excuses to not make it happen, or you can give reasons to make it happen. And so that's your choice. That's the wonderful thing about being alive and being human, is
Yeah.
you have choices in either direction, and that's what depicts who you are. That's what creates your character, are the choices that you make. And every single moment of every day, you're either building in one direction or falling to the other.
Amen.
And so it's your choice, 100%.
Like
And
it.
you have to carry the weight. Like, there is a price on each side, and you have to carry the weight and pay the price for each direction. But hopefully, if you create reasons to succeed, like, there's a lot of positive things that you get on the other side of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
like
I
it.
also think, Randy, like what you were talking about, you know, living for the day, that's something that's really important for people that people cannot connect to. Like, I personally, I can connect to it. Like, I understand it. Like, living in a situation where, you know, like, you've had friends die, you've had people die in your arms, you've had situations where you yourself felt there's kind of no way out of this. I probably am going to die. Like, and then you make choices of what you're going to do, and it's never hopefully do anything except succeed. And so you do what you need to do to succeed. But without those type of experiences, it's very difficult for people to put things into perspective that way, unless they have death in their lives, where they have a lot of death in their life with people who die around them. And, you know, we have a tendency to say we're going to live for the people that are not here anymore. We're going to live the lives that they can't live. We're going to celebrate that. Like, that's what we're going to do because our brothers just died for a very specific thing that we're doing on a daily basis that we decide to do. And it's up to us to live for them if they've died. And it's like, we need to choose to do that. If we don't, then what are we doing? Like, are we actually failing them? Or are we actually living and celebrating them?
Yeah. Yeah, that's it, man. Like the guys that are no longer with us, I'm sure they're looking down and there's things that are going on in the world that they're very proud of, and there's things that they're probably shaking their head. And you know, there's nothing that they can do about it, but there's a lot that we can do about it. You know, there's a lot that we can and we should be doing something about it. So
Yes, sir. That's our obligation. That's it. Like, to me, that's our job. Like, our job is to do that. It's,
yeah,
you know, and if we don't, again, like, every day you wake up, it's a new day, and you choose to do it again the next day, either the right way or the wrong way. And so even if you've had 1,000 bad days, like, tomorrow is a new day, you know, pick the weight up, start carrying it forward, and do the right thing, and make it the best day it possibly can be. And don't live in the past. Don't even live in the present. Like, start moving to the future. Like, you're moving through the present. Like, live in the future. Like, plan for it. Move to it.
Yeah.
You guys want to hit one of these other questions?
yeah. Let's do one more.
Okay. Um, hmm. Let's see. What's the biggest lesson you have learned from an adverse condition or experience?
Yeah.
It's
Breathe.
a big.
Yeah.
Breathe. Honestly, like breathe. You know, I can't stress enough how important it is to take a deep breath, open up your eyes wide. You know, when things are chaotic and they feel like they're going sideways, we have a tendency to hold our breath, or even worse, maybe, you know, shallow chest breathing. Like take a real big, deep belly breath, and that will help clear your senses. But yeah, I mean, I can speak from experience. Adverse conditions. What I learned from it is take a deep breath.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. Breathe and move. Like movement is life. Like attack your plan. You have a plan. Breathe. Collect yourself. Attack the plan. You know, go through the motion that you put into motion. If you don't, like you're gonna get stuck. So don't get stuck. Whatever you do. You know, movement is life in every aspect. So
Yes, sir.
Ryan, what do you think?
I would just build on that with you guys too. Like, yeah, take a deep breath, step back if you can, and take it in for a minute. Like, I can speak to like operational things where the plan is this, we put it in motion, and then all of a sudden, shit, something happens, and then you're like, that didn't work. Okay, now what?
Yeah.
And it's like that was the goal. So what's the contingency plan? What's our this? And being the guy that has to usually make those decisions now is like, you, like everybody's like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And it's just like, hey, just like everybody, just chill for a sec. Like, let's just take a deep breath. We're gonna step back. We're gonna regain our resources, and then we're gonna put the new one into motion. Right, build off
Yep.
that. But yeah, it is that, right? Because I find as humans, and everybody's like, we're very linear, right? It's like, okay, we're gonna go this way, and that's my destination. And then all of a sudden, boom, a fork comes in the road, and you're like, shit, I didn't expect that. Now what? Because that was my goal. And yeah, and but yeah, the breathing is obviously the number one. And yeah, just sitting back and realizing that, like, it may not go the way that we want. 9 times out of 10, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And then figuring it out from there, sitting back and reassessing.
Yeah. Like breathe, think, activate.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think sometimes people will balk or they'll freeze because they want the perfect or ideal solution. Perfect doesn't exist, man. Perfect doesn't exist. So accept, you know, the 90% solution, right? So if you have a clear aim on what it is you're trying to achieve, you know, you've got an intent to achieve that particular goal, and then you have an end state. Well, how do you get to the end state? Oh, man, there might be multiple flights of stairs, but you'll eventually get there. Just, you know, I think yeah, there's just no such thing as perfect, so it's okay. Like it's okay. Figure things out. Take a deep breath, and you know, meander your way through the journey. You know?
Mm.
Yeah. I think anybody who's operated in any way knows that. Like there's no perfect. And there's always going to be like, this was your plan, something goes boom, and now it's not your plan anymore.
Yeah.
Like the plan goes sideways. And now we have to collect and we have to get moving again. Oh, cool. But people have a tendency to get stuck, they get frozen. And breathing is the first thing they need to do, obviously.
So,
You know, there's two. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, no, actually, finish your point first, and then I have a question for you guys.
No, I was just looking at, there's actually two questions here that are pretty good questions that going towards what we're going to do should probably get addressed.
Sure, let's do it.
One is, what is combat? What does it look like? How do you define the term?
Nice. What is combat? What does it look like? How do you define the term? Combat to me is, you know, there's confliction with other human beings that could involve hands. It could involve voice. Actually, it could be just a verbal conflict, but it's a conflict nonetheless with, you know, another human being. So how that conflict gets, you know, the resolution to that conflict, for example, can be a myriad of things or a multitude of a mixture. So to me, combat is accepting the fact that, you know, there's a face-to-face altercation, and whether it's verbal or physical, you know, there's going to be some negative. You know, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There's going to be some negative. So to me, combat is it's ugly, and there's nothing sexy about it. It can sometimes be brutal, but I also believe that sometimes brutal violence is the only solution. So I don't promote violence, but I 100% embrace violence.
That's awesome. I agree with you, like 1,000%. Like I agree. Like when it comes to combat in general, as a rule, like we're not the ones creating it. We're not the ones that are bringing it on. But if it needs to happen, we're the ones that are going 150 miles an hour to it, destroying the target, finishing as quickly as well as we can, and moving on to the next decision as soon as we can. But we're never the ones that are pushing the violence. We're not the ones engaging in it to begin with.
That's right.
But if you're going to address it, there's only one way to address it.
Amen, brother.
Randy? Oh, sorry, Randy?
Yeah.
Ryan?
No, do you have anything else to that besides before we go to Ryan?
I'd like to hear Ryan's point. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, me too.
To be honest, I mean, I don't really have anything different because I think you guys really answered that perfectly. That's exactly what I said. I mean, to me, combat is like a conflict of some kind as well, right? And Randy said it itself. It's either verbal or it starts verbal and goes to hands or whatever it may be. But yeah, and I find the biggest thing, and you guys already touched on it without saying the word, is that combat mindset, right? To have like it's once you're there, right? So that fight or flight, and we're not in the business of flight, so
Yep.
you're fighting, right? And there is no, as Randy, you said it, right? We used to talk about a light switch, but it's not really a light switch; it's a dial, and I'm always 2 or 3 decibels above the next person.
That's right.
And then
That's
we're
awesome.
not looking for it, but when it comes, we're ready to accept it. And yeah, and I'm gonna crank that up to 11, man, if that guy's at a 10. But then I will reassess that motion and start dialing it down if he's coming down, but I'm still gonna remain one level above him.
Yeah.
Or her, or whatever comes my way, right? But yeah, I think
And I think emotional control can be taught. I think some people inherently have it pretty well dialed in, but some people need to be taught how to control that. Where I know sometimes that people are maybe they go a little bit too far. And we talked about accountability and excuses earlier. Sometimes people go a little bit too far, and their justification is, "Well, that's just the way I am. That's my personality." It's like, well, let's be honest with ourselves. Can we make adjustments that are more positively or more optimally designed for a better performance by acknowledging that there's a shortfall or a limitation, and then we can look to improve that? Because to simply suggest that, well, it's just the way I am, that's my personality, to me, that's saying that you're very closed-minded and you're not open to the suggestion that, hey, man, there are certain levels of aggression that 100% are justified, and then there are other elements of aggression that that is not justified.
Yeah, I agree. And that sounds like more like an excuse, like someone's using an excuse saying that. When they say that, like it's just how I am. And like in life, I think we can all agree, like, isn't the goal to become better than what we are?
Right.
Like the goal in life is not just to accept what we are, but to try to become better in every way. And to say that's just how I am, that's not saying that you could become better in any way. Like,
yeah. And when we get into this weekend coming up on the the 13th, 14th, 15th of May, we're going to be able to give all participants examples, real life examples of exactly that dial analogy. And one exercise that I'm really excited to share with you guys and with whoever's participating is when we get into edged weapons. There are some people out there who are absolutely against the notion of using an edge weapon on another human being as a force multiplier. And I've had people look me right in the eye and they say, I would never be able to do that. I would never be able to use this blade on another human. I'm like, okay, I would never say never, first off. Second of all, if you have a blade and you are proficient and confident in using the blade, that means that you are now an asset. You have something that maybe somebody that you're facing doesn't have. And then the exercise that I'm excited to share with folks is when we put a training blade on somebody and we turn it into a grappling match, watch, it's so interesting, man. Watch how quickly people will pull that blade out.
mm-hmm.
with the notion to use it. And oftentimes I'll challenge folks that I'm working with, and I'll say, if that was not a training blade and that was a real blade, would you treat it the same, knowing that the consequences would be severely different? And then it makes them think, you know? In other words, just because you have a tool does not mean that you should use the tool. And the problem is, if you flip that on its head, what good is it to have a tool if you don't know how to use the tool? Right? So making people think, you know, it's like shit. And it's so enjoyable to watch because it's training, and it's meant to, like you said, Brian, it's meant to improve. We're meant to improve and better ourselves and better our understanding and better our awareness. And the only way we can do that is through training. You can read as many books as you want. It's not going to help you.
Of course. And I also think people who say they would never, my experience with that just means they haven't experienced that situation yet enough.
Fair.
Where, you know, if they had, they might not say never. You know, it's very rare that I've run into the person that would say never once they've experienced something bad. Like when you go to retrieve people who have been held in some place and they work for, say, a mission, and that person going into that situation would probably have never said, well, I would never have killed somebody, I would never have shot somebody, I would never have stabbed somebody. On the way out, their conversations are a little bit different. You know, once they've experienced the situation, the brutality that they've seen or felt, like I think it at least in my experience, they have different conversations leaving than they did going in. And that just lends itself to experience. And I think that more than anything else, there might be people who will still say, no matter what, I just won't ever do that. I'm not saying there's not. There's always that. But I think the percentage is very low.
Fair.
You know, once they have certain experiences, personally. The last question I will ask is, what does the role of warrior temperament mean to you? Absolute essence of assaulter / tactical operator, deep part of their nature. Is it a deep part of their nature? So it's an absolute essence of the assaulter, tactical operator, and is it a deep part of their nature? I believe that's what they're asking. So what does the role of warrior temperament mean to you within that guise of assaulter, tactical operator, and is it a deep part of their nature?
It's a good question.
Yeah. So like, first of all, what's warrior temperament mean?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of like how you've worded it, is that like you're calm but confident, like you're not out of control, but you are fixated on the goal and you know that you are not going to quit and it's going to get done. I guess would be that's a warrior mindset to me, I guess, right?
Sure.
Temperament / mindset.
Yep.
When you add the temperament into it, it makes me think like you're patient, but you're ready, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So yeah,
I would probably change that to, I mean, personally, I would change it to warrior mindset over temperament.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's simply that. Like we've kind of touched on it on a couple of topics already, is that, yeah, like I'm confident. I see the conflict and I'm good with it and I'm ready to go. And I'm ready to accept anything that comes my way, like, and knowing that I'm going to, attack it head on. And I think that, as we've said through the conversation, is that those are skills that are built. I think that you could teach pretty much anybody that, but it would take time. But you can. It's a learned trait. Like I can't say that enough. Like for me personally, right? Like when I first started, pardon me, sorry. Like I'll say it personally, when I first started on the job, I don't know how confident I was. I can be honest with myself on that. And I would I tell this story all the time when I'm teaching seminars, usually to law enforcement. And I say, well, I wasn't confident. I was a big guy. I had all the tools. I was very tool dependent, right? Because I'm like, look at all these gadgets and like, and I'm wearing a uniform and you're going to listen to me and you're going to tell me what to do. And everybody that trained me at the college, they said they're going to listen to you because you're a police officer. And then all of a sudden people weren't listening to me and they were fighting back and all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute, like this isn't how it was supposed to go. And, but I didn't make excuses and realize like, well, that's just the way it's going to be. And I need to work around it. And I would lose control and I would yell at people when I shouldn't have been yelling because I wasn't confident. And, and I, years ago, quite a while ago, I'm just like, hey, like, what am I going to do to fix this? And then I came back to martial arts after being away for a long time. And I found the right people, like you two people on this podcast who are great men, and other people that are close friends of mine. And they've, we've worked together for years. And now when I walk out there, um, I don't sweat anything anymore. Like not, and that's not me being cocky. That's just me being, I'm confident. I'm like, okay, if you want to fight or you want to do this or you want to resist or you want to pull, this edge weapon or this, that'll be like, okay, I'm ready for that. I don't want that to happen, nor am I welcoming it. But if it happens, no problem. But this, how I'm talking now is how I talk to everybody. Even if somebody's screaming in my face, I'm just like, yeah, right on. Like, okay, like that sucks. Yeah, you hate my uniform. I know, man. I hate it too. But let's talk about this. Like, I'll do anything, right? But that never happened before until that confidence came into effect, right? So, and I think I will 100% stamp that all happened because of the circle I have, the people I train with, and what I've learned from them, and that is carried on.
Amazing.
Randy, what do you think?
Man, it's awesome. It's amazing to hear from Ryan. He can recognize, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there who can connect with it, but recognize the growth when it happens. The level of confidence transpires into what I believe a warrior mindset is. It's a set of habitual behaviors. Take care of yourself, take care of your mind, take care of your body. On a consistent basis. We're humans, we're creatures of habit. So creating positive habits that have an effect on the way we perform day to day, we can control that. There's external factors and there's intrinsic and extrinsic factors that help create a person. I think a true warrior is self-aware enough to know what they need to work on, and they are courageous enough to put a foot forward and try to correct those limitations.
Yes, I agree. I agree with both you guys. Put it perfectly. Honestly, there's not too much to add to it. It's somebody who's calm in chaos always. The person who's calm in chaos because they are confident in their tools, confident in their skills, which also lends itself to always being a student because you're always evolving, always learning, and there's always somebody better. So you should be learning from those people who are better than you. You should always be searching those people out. And that never ends. I've been doing this over 50 years and I will never stop searching for people better than me not because I'm looking to gauge myself, it's because I want to get the information that I'm lacking. And you're always lacking information, as you should be.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's impossible to be perfect. It's impossible to be the ultimate of anything. I mean, you wouldn't even think that way. Yeah. So the idea is to always be a student, always stay a student, always stay humble within that, but very confident. So the idea is like, as a warrior, you're calm in the chaos of life, you're calm in the chaos of battle. You have the answers based upon that because you can be calm, because you're able to think, you're able to breathe, you're able to apply all the things that we've talked about this whole time because of your mindset, because your ability to use your mind, and that being the most important tool in everything, in all of combat and all of life. And I think the more confident you are, the more comfortable you are, the more you're able to engage your brain, the more you're able to actually think out better ways to solve problems besides just destroying the target. Like the time comes, yes, that can be the answer as well. But before that time comes, there should be other answers that you're trying to apply. And if not, then okay, like you have the answer. and you have the skill to do that. So I think, you know, you guys hit the nail on the head with it, like honestly. And the idea is to bring all these things into the people that we're trying to touch. Like
Yes.
we're trying to bring this to them, even in a short amount of time, like on the weekend that we're meeting. Like, how can we bring all these, more of anything, the mindset to apply these skills and to also look for the new information and understand that they need constant guidance, they need constant training, and they should always be searching out for the things that they need to work on or the things that they do not know, and not have an ego in the sense where they don't feel comfortable enough to step up and say, I need to work on that. And then also not be lazy in actually doing the work.
Yeah.
Because without that, there's nothing.
I love it. Let's, if you guys don't mind, as we wrap this up, think about it for a second. There's different walks of life that are going to take part in this weekend coming up in a couple of weeks. If there's one thing that you hope to share, so every time I do these types of chats, I like to leave on a positive note, whatever that might be, as you put your head into this question that I'm going to provide for you. One thing that you hope to share with the participants that will be there on the 13th, the 14th, or the 15th, because some people have registered for one day, some people have registered for all 3 days. If there's one thing that you guys hope to share, what is it?
I'm going to say a philosophy of don't chase perfection, chase consistency.
Love it.
That's awesome. You know, I would want to share the, you know, the mindset that we spoke about, to making sure that people they keep an open mind and they keep a mindset of pushing themselves to search out the information and also putting in the work to take the information in. If you do both of those things, normally you're getting at least one thing out of, say, the weekend, which is all you can ever really ask, is at least take one thing out, one little thing, one piece of information that you make yours, and the rest will come in time. But at least you have one theory, one technique, one idea that makes you better than you were when you stepped in.
Yeah, I agree. I would say oftentimes it's okay to have a high level of expectation for sure, but you know, be honest and kind of kind to yourself. And if you leave the weekend with that one golden nugget that resonates with you, then to me that's a success.
Absolutely.
Right on, man. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we can wrap this up, and you know, for the viewers that will see this, you know, Ryan will make this available here on whatever social media platforms are available. For those of you that do get this, know that the registration is still open. We're still accepting spaces, and we look forward to having you involved. Myself, Ryan, and Brian. You guys can register through www.directactions. That's Direct Actions with an S.ca. And then scroll through the events page, and then you'll see it on the calendar. All the information is there. There's a little bit of a bio for Brian. There's a little bit of a bio for Ryan. So, you know, tell your friends, get involved. This is definitely not going to be the one and only. We're definitely going to do this in the future, but this is a first time event for us. So please, you know, get involved, show some support, but also, you know that this is for you guys. Yes, we love doing this stuff. That's why we're in this industry. But this is for you guys. If we didn't have participants, then we would just be shadow boxing in our basement for hours and hours, and nobody would learn anything. So hopefully you guys can take part in this weekend, one day or all 3 days. We'd love to see you.
Absolutely. That would be fantastic. Awesome.
Closing remarks from you, Ryan?
I'm just really excited about it for sure. I'm excited to be with both of you. Excited to see everybody, and just, yeah, I can't wait to get at it. It's going to be fun.
Right on. Brian, closing remarks?
I truly look forward to coming up and seeing everybody. For one that I haven't seen, if you know you come, that would be amazing. I'd love to see you again. If I haven't met you, I'd love to meet you and train with you. I think there's a magic that happens between the three of us every single time that we get together, and I would encourage people to take part in that, so that they, even if you take the next one, there's going to be something different in this one than in the next one, and there's a piece of magic that happens that you guys will understand when we're together. And so unless you're there, you're together, you won't get what I'm talking about. But when you're there, you'd understand it. And so I would encourage people to take part in that and jump on board and have a good time.
Yeah, man. Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Wicked. All right, guys. On that note, you guys have an awesome night. Have an awesome weekend.
Guys, 1 second. Let me ask something real quick.
Yep.
On a separate note.
Okay. All right. You want to you can close it out, Ryan, and then yeah, we'll keep it going.